Hey Jeff, how are you?
Good, thanks. I did talk with John a little while ago, Alan, so I know he's getting ready to join the meeting. But it's not quite 7. It's
I made it back in one piece.
good. Where were you?
All over Long Island Sound. I really gathered quite a bit of information from other harbor commissions too, all the way up and down. So it's kind of interesting what they publish and things like that. Good example, some good examples, some not so good examples, but it's very interesting.
Did you go into the Thames River? Head
No,
through London and Groton? Mhm.
no, I haven't seen that project at all. I went by the Thames River. Yeah, we did a real push to get back nonstop from Noank, so it was kind of skipped all that stuff.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so again, just as for the record, this is a special meeting of the Application Review Committee of the North Harbor Management Commission, and we will can have access to have available public speaking, a public hearing, public comment, I should say, at the end of our meeting. But I'm going to have just the commissioners mainly discuss in the beginning the issues that are at hand, and that being the discussing of the waterfront commercial zone district in Water Street. But I thought perhaps before we begin, we could probably bring everyone up to par as to what happened in the past and how we got into this this change of venue with regard to the waterfront commercial district. But we have a number of newspaper articles, and I think Jeff, you have I have those here.
Uh, Before we do that, John, would it be appropriate to just read what has been
Oh yes, well we have
requested of the commission?
Yeah, let me get that
It's a
here.
short statement, the referral
Yeah,
statement.
let me get that out here. And Michelle, if I could have your sharing screen, okay?
You should be all set.
Okay, we got it here. Okay. All right, here. Okay, everyone here see that? This is what all right, this is what this is the letter that was sent to us from Mr. Kleppen from Planning and Zoning. And it was the city has completed a study of our industrial waterfront plan, which is referred to as a plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission is seeking to incorporate this plan into the citywide POCD. And pursuant to Section 823 of the Connecticut General Statutes, we are referring it to you for review and comment. The proposed amendment is as follows, and they talk about page 250, which we'll look at 250 in a moment. And we're going to modify item 5. Now, there is currently no item 5 that is on that document right now. And so what they propose is the implement the recommendations of the industrial zone study and the Norwalk Industrial Waterfront Land Use Plan. The city will further evaluate, modify as necessary, and implement the recommendations within these studies. And that's what we're asked to comment on. But I think before we look at this, I think we need to look at the overview of the overall waterfront industrial zone area. Yes.
I just might mention that the statute recommendation is.
Yeah, that's incorrect. Yes.
That's incorrect.
Yeah.
That's a minor point, but there's this, the section is 22A113P for the referral to the Harbor Commission, and then there's a section in the Coastal Management Act for the referral to.
Yeah. So this statement here, is relatively incorrect.
It's just the section number.
Yes.
But the sections that apply both to the Deep Commissioner and to the Harbor Commission specify that these sorts of proposals have to be provided 35 days before a hearing is held on the proposal.
Basically, that's where we are right now.
but that's a technicality.
Right.
But if you don't mind, since I spent a lot of time on this going back to the 1980s,
Yeah.
there's a significant historical component of this, I think, that people making decisions should be aware of.
Yeah, let me get that up, Jeff.
So hold off on the newspaper articles for a second, John. Just before we get to them, the context of what we're talking about and this proposal, I think, has to be viewed in the context of the Connecticut Coastal Management Act. And that act was, I think it was passed in 1978 and then became law in 1979. And right after that, the city that Norwalk appointed a CAM advisory committee. And it's very interesting that this work in the 1980s spanned the terms of 3 different mayors. And when the state act was passed, it was Mayor Collins. And then after the act was passed, the act enables all of the coastal municipalities to establish what's called municipal coastal programs. And that's in large part how the policies of the Coastal Management Act are implemented. And the municipal coastal program of every town consisted of amendments to the master plan, now the plan of conservation and development, and the zoning regulations, as the plan and the regulations affect the designated coastal area. So right after the act was passed, as I said, the CAM advisory board was established, and it was Mayor O'Connor then. And so this was a committee of a volunteer committee, and at the time there was a planning and zoning commission. Both planning and zoning were in one commission. But the advisory committee consisted of volunteers and familiar names that we remember from going back that length of time in Norwalk. And they came up with a proposed amendment to the master plan. And that was adopted by the Common Council in 1982 and signed by Mayor O'Connor. But it's interesting to look at those old documents and see that they don't look particularly nice. There's no colored pictures or maps, but that doesn't mean that a tremendous amount of thought didn't go into it. Compared to the glossy reports that we see now, that doesn't mean that they're better than what was done many years ago. So anyway, the city adopted that amendment to the master plan that set forth the goal of the Marine Commercial District, among a bunch of other things too, policies for protecting coastal resources and recognizing Norwalk's maritime heritage. It was a significant piece of work. But the next part that was necessary in order to get the state approval of the municipal coastal program was to amend the zoning regulations. And that was not easy, because the principal area for the rezoning was along Water Street. And that was where the master plan proposed the Marine Commercial District. So that was objected to by property owners who were making the same arguments we heard back then, apply now, that the property owners need additional development and income generating development of the properties in order to support water dependent uses. So that work went on for a long time. And finally in 1988,
Yeah.
the Marine Commercial District was established. And I started working with the Harbor Commission in 1987, and the commission supported the Marine Commercial District. And then following that, and that was Mayor Esposito, who was mayor then. And I, even though the harbor management plan was still being worked on then, I remember it very well, because there was a approval ceremony at the Maritime Center, and I still have my invitation to it in 1988 to signify that Norwalk completed its municipal coastal program. And a principal matter that was of concern back then was the protection and encouragement of water dependent uses, because of the development pressure that was being experienced then for the waterfront. And in fact, that development pressure, especially in Stamford, was one of the impetus, if that's the right word, for the Coastal Management Act. The desired, most desirable development then was office space. But anyway, so the city established a marine commercial district in 1988, and then soon thereafter, the Planning and Zoning Commission was split into separate planning and zoning commissions. And the next year, the new zoning commission amended the marine commercial district to allow additional development, to increase the allowable development. And the DEP at the time, it was the Department of Environmental Protection, sued the zoning board. And they sued the zoning board for non-compliance with the municipal coastal program, which is authorized and has to be conducted in accordance with the Coastal Management Act, and also violation of the Coastal Management Act policies. And again, the emphasis there was on the protection of water-dependent uses. And so that lawsuit is interesting. It didn't go to court. It was settled out of court. And I'm trying to figure out exactly what the agreement was that allowed DEEP to not take it to court. And I've had discussions with the former DEP commissioner who's retired. And he said to me that he doesn't recall, but he knows that the agreement would, in order for him to agree to it, it would not have diminished in any way the standing of the Coastal Management Act policies. So what we think is what happened, and this is subject to
Interpretation.
confirmation,
Yeah.
is that the original marine commercial district allowed for 17 units per acre, 17 residential units per acre. The amended district that DEP sued over was allowed 25 units per acre. So it increased the density. And then what my understanding is that the end result was that the density became a little over 21.8. That's what the DEP told me. And that would indicate there was a compromise between the 17 and the 25, but that has to be confirmed. But the main thing is that this work was part of Norwalk's municipal coastal program that was approved by DEEP. Now, in that waterfront zoning, I can't always remember the name of it, the waterfront industrial plan or zoning, there is a section on background, but there's no reference to the municipal coastal program. And in fact, there's a reference to the harbor management plan, but it's described as a state plan. So that's inaccurate. But again, that's a minor thing that could be addressed. But the significant thing, in my opinion, is that there's no reference to this history. And my feeling is that people in Norwalk that were volunteers spent years working on this. And I understand that things change and you go in a different direction and that's what this waterfront industrial zone studies mentioned, how the waterfront is dynamic and it's subject to change and dealing with existing conditions. But I just don't think it's correct to not at least acknowledge the history of this and all the work that was done back then by people, or else it's just lost. And then the other significant part that's relevant now, and I mentioned that back in the 1980s, the principal issue that was brought up by DEEP or DEP at the time was the impact on water dependent uses. And again, the property owners had objected to it, but the principal issue was impact on water dependent uses. Now you have another priority concern that's most pronounced now by DEEP, and that's the impact of rising sea levels and also floodplain management. And DEEP has made statements, formal written statements that we have in Stamford, Stratford, and New Haven that I have copies of, we have copies of, making the statement that proposals that would increase residential density in the coastal floodplain are inconsistent with the Coastal Management Act and shouldn't be approved. And so we're waiting to get a letter from DEEP, but to be consistent with what they've said in the past, I think we would expect a similar statement. And the harbor management plan supports the marine commercial district, and it also supports the application of the state's coastal management policies for guiding waterfront development and land use. So I'll stop there, but I think it would be helpful, John, if you could share those articles, just quickly.
Yeah.
It's really instructive to see what happened back then.
Wait a minute, Jeff. Right.
Or I could do it too. if you-
I got it here, Jeff. Hold on. Okay, and oops, let's see here. Let's see, I'm gonna stop share and let me see here. Let me resume. Share screen and I'm going to.
And also, the interesting planning consideration is at the same time that this area is being proposed for rezoning, it's the subject of a resiliency study by the Circuit Group at the University of Connecticut.
Well, here we go, Jeff. Here we go. This is dating back to 1987.
Yeah, these are Norwalk Hour articles. I'm sorry you have to go through them, John, but it just gives you the sense of what was taking place back then and how the rezoning was a significant matter. Just go through it quickly if you would, John.
Well, people recognize this area right here. This is South Water Street area. These tankers do not exist anymore.
Harrison Gans and the
Harrison Gann,
were
yeah,
there.
right near where they're doing the staging area for the underwater lines, for the
Yeah.
ocean lines.
Yeah.
That's that area right there, guys. Okay.
You have to keep going through.
Yeah.
And again, these are articles describing what was taking place. This is from, and that's how we didn't have the online newspapers back then, so I cut out the articles and put them in a file. It's interesting to go back to them.
This is
But
November 8th,
again, it's the same
1987.
thing.
Yeah.
And then- Yeah, so here is 1988, the Water Street property owners formed a group and expressed objections to the zoning. And in
Right.
fact, threatened to sue the Planning and Zoning Commission. And they had their own proposal, which was substantially more than what, but there you can see the outline of the Marine Commercial District
This is our consideration right here.
for the rezoning in 1988. But you keep going, John, if you would. And then
This, yeah.
Yeah, same thing, planning and zoning, supporting the imposition of this, but the next one is interesting. This is Arthur Rock.
He
You
was
guys
the
don't recognize him.
DEP commissioner.
Yeah, he was the head of the coastal management program back then, and he was responsible for the drafting of the Coastal Management Act. And then later he became the DEP commissioner under Governor Rowland and Governor Rell. And I still talk with him. He's like a bigger than life character, but this was a statement in support of the marine commercial zone, which I had was, let's see, April.
This is
That's right before it was adopted.
April 19th, 1988. Yeah.
Yeah. Go down, and then after that, in July was the signing ceremony. After this is this lawsuit threatened by the Water Street property owners. I mean, we have this all on the website, John, I believe, so people can look at it. You're not to spend time.
Yeah, no, this was uploaded. This was
Yeah.
uploaded to the website.
And then now remember there's a separate planning and zoning commission. So this is the planning commission was opposed to the new zoning regulations that were proposed or not proposed, that were to be acted on by the zoning commission. Go down, John, here. And this is an interesting comment. The money factor, questions of who will profit from development stirs troubled waters. It's interesting, that some of the same issues that we're dealing with now with respect to the redevelopment of waterfront properties. Go down, John. And then here's
This is the article right here where they sued,
the statement of the lawsuit.
but nothing expired, but we can find out.
Yeah, that's the lawsuit when the new zoning commission adopted the changes. And then that didn't go to court. And Mr. Rock told me that they worked out an agreement that was acceptable to DEP. And my sense was that what we've looked at, it was compromising between what the original development density was for the Marine Commercial District and what the the most recent density was, and they have that. And then this last former zoning heads lash out at present group. Those were the former chairs of the Planning and Zoning Commission who objected to the rezoning of the Water Street area. So my thought is this is all part of the history, and that's not reflected anywhere in that waterfront zoning study. As you might imagine, the consultants are not from Norwalk, but my sense is that if something is to be done differently, and it's changing that marine commercial district and the municipal coastal program, it should be addressed in a straightforward manner, and it should be explained why the city feels that's acceptable and still consistent with the Coastal Management Act. Not that it can't be done, but that it should be addressed as. So that's my. And again, we have the resiliency work now that we're talking about. And then again, in 2019, the POCD was updated, and the commission commented on that and submitted a fairly substantial report that we call the Coastal Vision, which is our.
We sent that around. That's this here.
Yeah, that was to be incorporated by reference into the POC document. I'm not sure that it was. But we pointed out a lot of this background information.
We sent the copy. You guys have a copy. Chris, you have a copy of that. Matt, you have a copy of that. Both. Yeah.
So that's part of it. And remember when that POCD was first proposed back in the draft in 2019, it proposed eliminating the marine commercial land use, because that's the way it goes. The POCD sets out the land use categories and then the zoning implements it. But the first draft we looked at this proposed eliminating the marine commercial district and replacing it with a general commercial district, and the commission objected to that. So it did not do that. And then now we have the added considerations of the resiliency work, and how that relates to what we're talking about here. And as we discuss this, I did have an interesting discussion with the director of the CIRCA program, which is the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, CIRCA. So I can mention some of the things he said, but that's 24 minutes. That's the background to our discussion tonight. Thank you for letting me talk about it.
Well, certainly. So everyone received a copy of this, and let's go back. And this is the citywide plan. Now, this is the section right here that they want us to incorporate. This is page 250. And is that it? Let me see here. Yeah, page 250, modify V, as they put it here. But in essence, there is no V on that. Let me get out of here. Is this visible now? The city plan? Is this, you see this 250?
Correct.
Is that visible on my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm assuming is that this is to delineate and use a planning district to advance planning throughout the city. And so this is item 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I think they want to insert that item 5 here.
Which is the reference to that waterfront industrial study and plan.
Right. So what that means, I'm not exactly sure, as far as create a neighborhood association. So I don't know how that follows here as item 5, but that's where they plan to insert that statement that they sent us. But the question is how well does that address what needs to be done, or what we have proposed previously, or what the Harbor Management Plan has stated, and what the Coastal Management Act states?
Oh, and John, can you just, sorry to interrupt. Can you just scroll up 1 sec? Because I just looked online and I think I'm looking at this same document, and there is a number V in the one I'm looking at.
Okay.
This is 2019 to 2029. Yeah. So in this version I just looked at on the website.
Fairly recent, because this is when I downloaded what was sent to me.
Okay. Yeah, this I just looked it up right now.
They must have modified that, Chris.
I can put it into the chat or
So,
something.
so what was there? Let me put it. Let me suggest here. What I'm assuming is there is. Let me see if I get this up here now. You see the statement here is what they must have changed. What was in there probably is what is not in red.
What's in there is it says, you know,
Chris,
the
why don't
same
you
thing that
share
we.
your screen so we're looking at the right one together?
Okie dokie.
Let me see.
Let's see here.
This is what was sent to us. Is this document shown where it says Katie Dykes?
Mine might be old. Again, I just Googled the thing. Oh wait, mine said what we looked at before, where it said they'll institute the industrial plan and change as needed, pretty much. It's a two sentences.
Mhm.
But this may be an incorrect.
Well, what I'm assuming is in there is to implement the recommendations of the industrial zone study. And I
Yes.
think whatever is in red here is new. That's what I'm assuming. It's new. That they want to change.
John, that just may be new compared to the first draft that they did of that recommendation.
Because then they have something. Then they have the study crossed out here, and this is these
Yeah.
studies.
So
So-
that wouldn't be in the existing plan. It's probably just an amendment of what was first
Right.
proposed.
That's what I'm saying. So the version that Chris is stating has this item perhaps in black, correct?
Yes.
The version that I have does not have any item on there. That it just shows. Let me see if you hear it. No, this is what I showed here. This is the one I had here. Is right here. But you have a document that has 5 over here, right?
Yes, it has a V. Yeah.
Right, it's a V. So that's obviously, you must have a later version than the one that I have here. And so what they were doing is here, and going back to this document, what is new, what you have in your document, the document that you're mentioning is that's page 50, modify V. I'm assuming that this is what they want to insert
Yeah.
in that area.
Insert, John, but it can't be in the existing POCD because that's from 2019.
I know, that's
So whatever's being proposed is what the significance, that's what we have to review now.
Right. But what I'm saying, that the version that Chris has is a newer version than the one that was originally sent to me. I
Yeah,
don't.
so the part that they say it's just exactly what was in the thing, where it says modify V, and then V says implement the recommendations of the industrial zones. The city will further evaluate and modify as necessary to implement. That's what it says.
Right. What is new now is what is in red. Is what is in red here. That's part of their amendment, Jeff.
Yeah, but the whole thing is an amendment, John.
Yeah.
The whole thing is, so whatever is
Okay.
given to us now with the red,
Right.
there's no existing part of that in the POCD. This is because the existing POCD is from 2019.
I'm talking about the original version that it was sent to me. That 5 was not in there, but the one that Chris is mentioning is in there, which is still what is being proposed.
That's what's being proposed, and it's essentially amending the POCD with a reference to a separate study. And then if you read the rest of that statement, it talks about being able to modify that study.
Right. To modify as necessary and implement the recommendations within these studies.
That would imply that it could be modified without having to change the POCD. And the study is, well, of course, it's very professionally done, but it's a big study and it's dense. And in the back there, in the appendices, there are what they call test fits, where they
Yes.
come up with scenarios that could be followed in order to increase the density of development along Water Street.
Right. So I read that not that they can modify the plan, they can modify the recommendations when they implement them. That's the way I read it. Nobody's going back and modifying the recommendations in the report. They will take the recommendations and modify them to be implemented.
That's right, and that means that basically they can do with what they want with that referenced report.
Correct. Yes.
That's I think that's a significant issue.
Yes, because and we haven't even looked at the waterfront study yet as a group, but there is significant changes to the recommendations as they appear in the proposed plan.
Yeah.
And not just marine commercial, also all along the waterfront, whether it's the upper reaches of the river on both sides or in East Norwalk. There's changes to the zoning which affect the waterfront.
That's correct.
But we're not yet, Chris, like, the proposed zoning hasn't been presented to us, although it's certainly, we have to take it into consideration when we're thinking about the impacts of this. But what's subject to the review now is that statement about amending the POCD to implement the recommendations in that separate report, which can be modified as
Well, I bring it up because we now know how they plan on modifying it.
yeah, right.
So, if we say they can modify it any way they like, or, we now know how they plan on modifying it, do we want to say, no, you have modified the recommendations of the waterfront industrial study too much, and therefore we don't agree that we should just have a blanket modification clause added to the POCD?
I think
Those are the questions before us, and
Yes.
I'll stop talking a minute, I'm sorry about this, but we also have the issue of the development in the 100-year floodplain. And at the same time, there's a resiliency
study, which we have not.
Well, the literature and my involvement in floodplain management for a number of years, and of course, the term resiliency is a relatively new term, but it was always considered part of hazard mitigation. But when and we can follow up on this, but in talking with the director of the CERCA program, and again, CERCA said they're not involved in land use recommendations here. They're doing their evaluation, and they hope that the decision makers will take it into consideration. But it's certainly always been my understanding, and also the director mentioned that the purpose of resiliency planning is to accelerate recovery following a flood event.
Right, not to expand.
And it can also be for the purpose of reducing the vulnerability of existing development.
Right.
But it's not good planning, and I think, I'm not saying that as a definitive statement, but I think many floodplain managers would agree, and the CERCA group would agree, that it's not for the purpose of creating the conditions that would enable additional development in the floodplain, including additional residential development.
Right.
And I think that's a significant conflict. We brought that up with planning and zoning department, and the response was that the redevelopment of these properties is so significant that it shouldn't be limited. And now that's a statement that, fine, they can make that and they can move this forward, but is it in effect good planning? And is it consistent with the Coastal Management Act? And deep in other towns has said it's not. So I think those are the two issues. And also we know that the proposed zoning would eliminate half of the marine commercial district. So the argument could be made right there, unless there's a counter argument, that invalidates Norwalk's municipal coastal program. And then it also proposes that mixed use, urban density mixed use district, not only on the north part of the Water Street area, but also in the Upper Harbor on the west side, which is also in the 100-year floodplain. So I think that conflict has to be resolved somehow. It may get resolved when the zoning is approved or adopted, but it's certainly a valid this point to discuss. All the emphasis on sea level rise and resiliency and planning for the sustainability and resilience. It just seems that I'll stop. You know what I'm saying, yeah.
Let me ask you one question, Jeff. The lawsuit that was settled back in the 80s between Deep and the city, because Deep felt that it violated the Coastal Management Act. Am I stating that right?
Well, yes, they violated the Coastal Management Act and also Norwalk's municipal coastal program.
Right. Okay.
Which were the changes that had been approved by Deep. But the principal issue of concern was that it would lessen the protection of water dependent uses, and it would encourage more non-water dependent uses of the property. So the flood hazard was not brought up at that time, even though.
Right, so just, this was a settled issue 35 years ago with an agreement between the city and the state that they couldn't increase density in the marine commercial district. And
No,
so
I'm not saying, there was an agreement. And
We don't know exactly what that agreement was about.
well, whatever that agreement is, that's still a binding agreement.
We don't know that, Chris. That's why we've asked, trying to track down people that were involved with it years ago. And the DEP said that there's probably files on it in the Attorney General's office, but it didn't go to court. But whether that's still a binding agreement, because it's whether that is or not, we're still dealing with the proposed elimination of half of the marine commercial district.
Right. Well, my point is if the new proposed zoning is in violation of a standing agreement, then it's dead in the water. I mean,
Well, we don't know right now what
we don't, right, and we don't know.
how the DEP is going to act on all this.
Well,
But the assumption, Chris, that we've trying to develop, and we look through all of the minutes of the previous planning and zoning commission, the subsequent zoning commission, and those minutes don't describe what the agreement was. There were executive session discussions, but there was no statement in the minutes as to what the agreement might have been. Our assumption is that the first zone allowed for 17 residential units per acre. The revised zone allowed for 25, and then it ended up with about 21 units per acre. So that leads us to believe that there was a compromise, but we don't know for sure.
we don't,
Right.
But subsequently, DEEP has made, as I said, formal statements that the proposals that would increase the density are inconsistent with the Coastal Management Act, and that industrial
In other municipalities.
Yes, and that industrial waterfront zone study, when you look through those test cases, and it's very hard to, I don't know how many hours I spent on that, and so did DEP, but that seems to be recommending that the existing density can be increased, as long as there are other measures having to do with green infrastructure and some other things that are involved. And we also know that one of the matters with one of the recommendations from the resiliency study, we've heard about this, is the discussion that perhaps the elevation of Water Street could be raised.
it wasn't Water Street itself, it was the streets that come into Water Street.
I
So
think
the
that's
resiliency study, because there is no housing east of Water Street, there was no consideration of how to evacuate people from east of Water Street.
Michelle, could I share my screen? Just, and I'll try to stop.
Let me stop sharing here.
I think we have a hand being raised here by Telesco.
Hello? Yes. Who is doing the secretarial service for Telesco?
Michelle, need to unmute them.
I'm not sure who's on from Telesco, but
They have their hand raised for some reason.
yeah.
Well, Jeff, yeah, well, these,
I'm sharing my screen, just.
yes, these are still evident, Jeff, you don't have to, yeah. All right,
These are scenes on Water Street from a number of different storm events. I believe this is Storm Sandy. So I just took these off of a search on the internet, and as long as the photos were published in a newspaper, I felt it was appropriate that I could copy these. But clearly this is an area at risk to flooding.
well, yeah,
Yeah, It's
Wow.
5 to 6 feet below base flood elevation.
Well,
And
you know,
that's- I mean, that's not really, this really isn't in dispute. I mean, everybody knows it floods. Everybody
exactly.
knows it's gonna flood. The resiliency doesn't really address the flooding of, you know, they're gonna, I'm trying to get them to make sure they have recommendations in there to deal with some of the backflow, but it won't, true storm surges, which overtop the seawall are not gonna, and those are the real dangerous ones. So that, none of this is in dispute. They still wanna change the zoning and not.
But one of, I believe that I've read that one of the recommendations from the resiliency study is to raise not just the connecting streets, but Water Street. And the reason for doing that is to argue that if there is additional residential development, the access to that area would be dry. Because that's, you can, comply with the FEMA standards and build the first floor up over the base flood elevation. But if the access to and from the area is impassable, then that represents a risk to life and property.
Yeah.
And so in order to make it acceptable, I think this was the proposal to raise those streets. But of course, when you raise the street, it doesn't get rid of the floodwaters, as Chris said. It just directs them someplace else.
Well, it just dams it up on the other side.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah,
guys.
and
All right, go on, Chris. I'm sorry.
well, the resiliency study, as I read it, did not include raising Water Street itself. It was they looked at the intersection of Concord and Water, and similar to what they did with Raymond Street. They raised Raymond Street when they redid Ryan Park and the whole new development there, so that Day Street and Raymond Street in the sides, all those new buildings could evacuate west, in a flood event down on the waterfront. But anyways, that's.
But our charge is to deal with this amendment here. And is there a circuitous language in here that we have to deal with?
Right.
I mean, how do we adjust that? Because I'm not sure to implement the recommendations. Do the harbor management plan and the Coastal Management Act is clear as far as what is required for a marine commercial district, as far as what's required. And we have policies in our plan that certainly address that. Are those same policies reflected in these documents here, and are they reflected adequate enough to make this circuitous involvement? Well, this plan is going to be recommended if we look at this plan, and this plan is going to be if we look at that plan. I'm not exactly sure how we can address that, Jeff.
Well, there's two things. There's the plans that we're adding to the POCD, and then there's the and I think it's within our purview now, and now meaning in the next month or so, to give our comments on the proposed zoning plan. Steve Kleppen said as much at his meeting with us in June. I went back and rewatched that because I wasn't able to attend the first time. But yes, there's things missing from the plan in terms of usage of the 5W that he said should be included. So I think we need to get that on the record. But also, I think it's well within our purview to comment on the plan that is out there for public comment now.
Right, but
not wait till it's approved by planning and zoning and then complain about it.
That's correct.
No, right. So our understanding is that the proposed amendment to the POCD will be acted on in September. So that means that there's not much time for the commission to
Exactly.
continue the discussion on Wednesday night, and then if necessary, have a special meeting. But we also want to make sure we have the comments from Deep. But I think that, well, I can make my comments or recommendations if you wish at some point. The document itself, well, I'll stop.
Just a quick question on that amendment. So as I'm reading it and as we have it there, it's got that it's got the parachute language in there that the city will further evaluate, modify as necessary, and implement the recommendations in the study. So basically they're going to say, we're going to look at what you guys recommend. We'll take it into account. We're going to do what we want. Is there any way if we are unable to, make them say like, well, we're not going to do this or that, or drastic things. Could we just add language into that clause itself that says something along the lines of, and the city will further evaluate, modify as necessary, and implement the recommendations within the study following a period of public comment, or following the, like, essentially make it so that they're on the hook, that they have to present what what the changes are. So we say these are what we recommend, and they say great, thanks, we're going to do what we need to do to make it necessary. But then they at least have to have some sort of public accountability, or some sort of a way that they have to come to the table and say, listen, we took your recommendations, this is what we're going to do, what do you think? As opposed to just letting them say, we took your recommendations, that's great, thanks for that, but we really want to do this, and we're just going to do it. So I'm wondering if there's any legal verbiage that we could add into this that essentially just makes it so because they're going to build in a parachute. That's basic politics and legalese. They're not going to tie their hands too hard. But can we make it so that at least if they're like, well, you know what, we're putting a 10-story building there, then they have to come and they have to say, and they have to give it a certain amount of time to be reviewed. Like, is that something that we could do? I don't know. You guys all have much more experience
So
than I do.
my understanding is that's what's going on now. So
Okay.
we have all these studies, the plan, the POCD, which is now being, they're adding the waterfront study, the industrial study. But they have already issued the public draft of the Norwalk regulations. The whole zoning, the new zoning plan is out for review now. The City of Norwalk zoning regulation update. That's what's being reviewed, and we see lawn signs all over the city about. So there's an ongoing set of hearings about this very thing. My concern is that because the March one didn't include the updates to the marine commercial zone, that's out there now, that these changes and the bulk and the height and all that is out there for review for Water Street, not the north end of Water Street. 6-story buildings, 25-foot atriums. I tried to figure out how, because it doesn't say how high the building can be. It gives a bunch of parameters. The first floor, the second, and all that. I came up with about 85 feet. They could build something 85 feet high on the east side of Water Street, 6 stories high, up to 25-foot first floor, 10-foot second, next 5 floors. Pretty substantial structures on 50% of the lots, 50% of the area of the lots. So that we know what they intend. We know what they want to promote for this area. In the meeting, it was said that this area is in the TOD, the transit oriented development, but it is actually not. East of Water Street is not in the SoNo transit oriented development district. I looked that plan up from 2016 today. And it is mapped out, and the TOD ends on the west side of Water Street and does not include any of the marine commercial district. Okay. So that's a bit of a red herring. I mean, you could say, oh, anything within half a mile of the train station is transit-oriented district, not at the defined transit-oriented district that governs our planning. So that's a misnomer. It's not in the transit-oriented district.
Again, does any of that
development district,
any of that POCD contain any of the information that we had on this proposal here, this proposed coastal division? How much of that has been incorporated into the POCD for review? In other words, if they're going to make changes, why shouldn't this document be considered part of that POCD when they consider what they plan to do in the waterfront industrial district? Because all that information is in that document right there. It's basically on the policies and the proposals that we have.
What Chris said is a good question, and that has to do with the form of the recommendations that the commission makes. The commission is reviewing this to evaluate consistency with the harbor management plan.
That's correct.
And if the commission can't make a favorable recommendation for the reasons that we would enumerate, then the approving entity, the zoning the Planning and Zoning Commission requires a 2/3 or
Two-thirds.
majority
Yep.
vote to approve it.
That's
So,
correct.
so one simple, if you chose to do it, you could say it's consistent with the plan and we have no objections, provided this happens and this happens. But I don't see that you could make that statement because of our understanding that half the marine commercial district is going to be eliminated, and
Correct.
our understanding it's inconsistent with the Coastal Management Act. But so that the form of the recommendations to say can't make a favorable recommendation at this time for these reasons. Or do you want to say make recommendations or suggestions? I think if you're going to reference a separate study in the POCD, there could be some statement in the POC document itself talking about the purpose of that. And I would argue that there should be a statement upholding the goals of the Coastal Management Act and Norwalk's historical municipal coastal program.
Well, that should be, and well, have we reviewed the document we're incorporating at this point? Have we reviewed the waterfront industrial study to see if they reference those correctly?
If you look at I think it's page 50, and that's the page where they talk in very general terms about the Coastal Management Act, but they don't mention in any significant way well, they don't mention at all the municipal coastal program.
Right.
And they refer to the harbor management plan as a state plan. So those are, well, in one case an omission, in the other an inaccuracy. But that could be fixed easily. That's
Sure.
descriptive stuff.
And
The issue has to do with those test fits at the end, where they're giving
Right.
different scenarios for new development. And that's where there's, I think, Chris was saying, there's room for, I was going to use a different term, but to have some discretion and be able to do something different.
Well, I understand what John is saying. I mean, either we ask them to add the plan, the 2019 document in this addendum. I think it's too late to comment on the waterfront industrial study. That document's done. And we had our chance, we had presentations on it, we had our chance to comment on it. But that document is finished and submitted. And all we're doing now is saying whether it should be incorporated into the POCD with the provision that they can modify the recommendations. That's the issue in front of us. That document's done. So commenting on what's in it or what's not in it at this point, that ship sailed.
I disagree. I disagree with that.
Well, I think we need.
The mayor signed. The mayor. There was an action about this, authorizing the mayor to sign whatever is necessary for the adoption of that waterfront industrial study or zone. But then we said that that's not the end. It still has to be adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that hasn't taken place yet. So there is opportunity for us to comment, and if we think the document is flawed, then it's the responsibility of the commission to point that out. If they adopt it anyway, then that's what it is. But
okay.
we brought up those questions about the municipal coastal program and in the course when we had meetings with the consultants.
Right. My concern is we're commenting on the last step instead of on the next step. The next step is the zoning plan that's out there for review now.
But that's not what we're asked to comment on now, Chris.
We have been asked to comment on that. We were told by Steve Kleppen in June that we could comment on it.
Yes, but what was formally referred to us.
Correct. And this we have to deal with that issue as well.
Right.
And my point is that the plan that is out there for review now, that plan recommended that the West Bank lowlands and the East Bank lowlands, we're talking about the ONG area and Divine through United Marine along the West Bank, should remain heavy industrial. It has now been changed to the high density district.
Yes.
Urban density mixed use.
The industrial waterfront study they recommended that about 9 acres just along Water Street, not at the water, not extended to the water's edge for the full length of it, be, have the zoning change, and they had a limit of 50 feet, I think, in their recommendations. There's the details of lot sizes and I think it still had 50% coverage for structures, whereas the current zoning is like 35% coverage for structures. But their recommendation didn't include as much bulk as what's in the planning zoning now. And it incorporated a lot of waterfront, a lot of active business areas up to the waterfront that were not included in the waterfront study recommendations. So I think we can make the statement that the recommendations are being modified to a degree that we can is not consistent with the waterfront study.
I would, my suggestion is that they have to change the POCD first before they can change the zoning.
In the POCD, this is what they have up there now. Is this enough? In other words, this is the state Connecticut, state of Connecticut plans and regulations, and they said here the Connecticut Coastal Management Act 1972. Then they have the
What are you reading from, John?
page 50 on the POCD.
Not the POCD, the waterfront industrial plan,
No, this is the final waterfront study.
the final waterfront study. Yes.
So they state the Connecticut Coastal Management Act. They have the North Waterfront Guidelines, which they state back from 1998, comparison document, and then talk about the North Harbor Management Plan, 1990 to 2009, was recommended. Connecticut Coastal Management Manual, Connecticut Coastal Resiliency Interactive. The question is this addressed enough of what we would consider part of a plan?
My sense is no, because I'll call it up now, because if you look at those other sections, they describe the harbor management plan as a state plan. And where is this now? Beginning on page 50. There are incorrect statements that the Connecticut Coastal Management Act establishes regulations, it says. Well, they're not regulate. The act is written to comprehensively regulate waterfront and coastal development.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
The act establishes policies.
So this is the document that they want us to insert that item number that are modified 5 in.
Yeah.
But the whole document, it says, as far as we're concerned, is fraught with maybe a few inconsistencies.
And then under state of Connecticut plans and regulations, after they talk about the CCMA, the Connecticut Coastal Management Act, they talk about the subsequent Harbor Management Act. And they talk about under that section, the Norwalk Harbor Management Plan.
Yeah, it's the Norwalk Harbor Management Plan, 19, right.
But it's not a state plan.
That's the Norwalk Harbor Management Plan was prepared for the Norwalk Harbor Management Commission with input from the interested citizens.
But that discussion is under the section on state plans, John.
Well, the plan, no. Where are you reading, Jeff, where it says it's a state plan? In this document here on page 52?
Well, we're getting into, I can.
All right, well, that's it. Let's do that. But the thing is, I don't think they've gone far enough to address some of the issues that we feel are important. But, and the issues that I feel are important are in that coastal vision that we have.
Mhm.
That's probably says a lot more about the waterfront district than they even have in all the plans they have there combined. But
I mean,
nothing.
I'm sorry. I'm just like, do we think that the main issue that we're talking about here is, like flooding and overpopulation density, right? Is that kind of the crux of it?
Well, that's all part of it.
Well, and part of it is the loss of property for the use of marine commercial.
I mean, they didn't basically cutting that
Displacement of
whole
marine
in half,
businesses.
cutting it in half for reasons that I don't understand why. Why they're cutting that whole section in half? They got rid of a whole section of the marine commercial along South Water Street.
Because-
Right, but I mean, I think to Alan's point that he made earlier, a lot of that stuff's been kind of laying fallow. GNC's like they sold, they're done. They went and bought the Talmadge building with Gary Wetmore and the guys from All Seasons. So like they moved their operations south. Pretty sure that lot's been sold.
That's right
I'm just
right next to Ishodi Yacht Club. I think they're planning to keep that as a marina though. I think they're planning to keep it as a
Yeah,
marina.
no, they're planning to keep that as marina. Yeah, but that's like where the like GNC used to be further up, where is now zoned for residential. Like I hear you, and obviously, like I do think we want to make sure that we keep a lot of that stuff alive. But in this, it basically just says you can't do like shipbuilding, which they weren't doing anyway. They were doing like outboard repair.
Well,
So I'm just
the way it is now, you can't do boat storage, boat repair, port services. You can't do fish and shellfish processing, in the 5W. There's a whole slew of and 4W. So there's a whole slew of activities that will become non-compliant, both in the Upper Harbor on the west side and on the east side, in the East Norwalk side, that will become non-compliant based on the current plan.
So that includes Cops Island Oyster. Company?
Cops Island Oyster, and you will not be able to do shellfish processing in East Norwalk anymore.
right, but that's mostly expansion of their current
Sure,
operation, right?
they would be grandfathered, but what all this does is that it handicaps every operation there to modify their operation or expand their operation because it's no longer allowed.
I mean, I think the example I was bringing up the other day is all of a sudden Norm Bloom gets a grant from the state for kelp, and now he can't build a structure on his property in East Norwalk to harvest and produce that. It kind of seems backwards to me that we're allowing all these transit-oriented districts that get a lot of tax breaks and a lot of benefits and all this other stuff to put in lots of housing near, city transit-oriented areas, train stations, etc. I love that, but it seems like they're actually doing the opposite here in the Marine District, and they're kicking the Marine part out of the Marine District where they want to, so that they can have the west side of Water Street duplicated, but at 17 times the price on the east side of Water Street. That's just the gist I'm getting here. And, living in this area, it just seems like it's going to completely change. This wouldn't be allowed on 5 Mile River. I don't understand where this can even just kind of slide under the radar.
Well, that's certainly issues we have to contend with. As far as
Hey, John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're an hour in, so just pull us back a little bit. The charge of this meeting really is to have something to present to the commission, the full Harbor Commission on Wednesday night. So I just put that out there.
All right. All right.
A lot of good discussion here.
As a recommendation here.
I think we need to see what the DEP is going to submit.
Is there somebody else got a radio? But we're getting excessive feedback here.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
But the two concerns, maybe that's a feedback, John, or something.
Yeah. I don't know where the feedback is coming from though.
But if this, one concern is that there's a lack of the recognition of the Marine Commercial District history and of Norwalk's municipal coastal program. And that's sort of, I didn't work on it, but many people did. And I don't think that history should be lost. If they want to change what they did, then I think they should, in a straightforward way, say this is, these are the conditions now we're trying to deal with, but not to ignore that history and what was done before, or the importance of the municipal coastal program. And then my first thought was, unless they explain why they think this is still consistent with the Coastal Management Act, that just the act of eliminating half of the marine commercial zone would invalidate the municipal coastal program, unless they can explain why it doesn't. And then the other part about increasing the residential density
Right.
in the coastal floodplain, to the extent that that's been determined by DEEP to be inconsistent with the Coastal Management Act, that would also be inconsistent with the harbor management plan that supports the policies of the Coastal Management Act to guide land use.
No, the four of us here, we're going to bring this forward to the commission meeting on Wednesday.
But I think we also have to get the DEP code.
Well, I contacted Brian, and he's hopefully going to do what he can do to get me that letter.
And then we need to know when the public hearing is definitely scheduled to address this.
So-
But as Chris and Chris both said, I think that, you know, the statement that we were asked to comment on can be read as open-ended, that would allow the zoners, the planning and zoning decision makers, to amend the recommendations, you know, without having to amend the POCD.
That seems to be the most critical part here is, okay,
you're right,
we
Matt.
understand which direction they're going. How much leeway are we going to give so that we hand them the gun, we hand them the bullets, and 3 years from now we get shot? It's like, I just don't understand the whole premise here.
You're absolutely right. It's nail right on the head, man. Exactly.
And
it.
can we
And
put
we
some,
don't have to wait 3 years. We know what they want to do with the recommendations.
yeah, I mean, so can some type of language be put in, or is there, you know, do we kick this back out for more public review? And you know, what kind of
Well, I
power
think,
do we have over this next meeting and the remnants or thereof?
right. So my suggestion could be this, that we reject the language as it's submitted because you can say because it doesn't include the 2019 report that you guys came up with, but specifically because we reject the language that the recommendations can be modified because the implementation of these recommendations was not followed in the plan that is out for review now. We know they're not following the recommendations because we see the document. The document is out for review now. And, you know, my understanding is that if we reject it, the zoning commission can override our recommendation anyways, but they'll have to do that in a much more public forum with all the eyes on them than our little commission over here.
Right.
And, you know, and then there's still the issues of, you know, if anything gets proposed there, whether it's in violation of the CAM Act and everything else, but the train's about to leave the station on the zoning, on the rezoning plan.
All right, let's get those points down. Let's get these initial bullet points down so we can present them at least before the commission on
Right.
when. So how do you want to proceed? I mean, I haven't. Everyone's talking fast. Unless we have, let's go review back so we can put down.
I can write up all my notes about, because I've read through and highlighted
Yeah.
the final waterfront study.
Let's between now and Wednesday night, you know, try to
All right.
draft up some recommendations and present them to the commission with
Well,
the
what if this-
understanding that maybe, and we reserve the right to continue to look at it depending on when the hearing is.
Well, that's usually our standard language with regard to anything that we.
Yeah.
So, all right, why don't we do that? We submit the comments you have to me. I'll put them in a bullet form.
Yeah.
I'll send them back out to everyone for review.
Yeah.
Based on the topics that we covered tonight. And hopefully we'll get something together by Wednesday.
And did you want to amend the agenda if there's any public?
Yes, well, I mentioned that in the beginning. Yeah, we have,
Public that would like to say
Right,
something? I
so-
think that should be part of what.
yeah,
our
we're
discussion.
finished with our business here. So we'll put together some bullet points on what we discussed with regard to the POCD, with regard to the, lack of the Marine Commercial District, information that was in there, the importance of the municipal coastal program, and then perhaps mention the lack of responsiveness as far as that coastal management vision that the Harbor Management Commission has.
What would the sense of the commission be for the recommendation that based on what we have before us now, the commission is not able to make a favorable recommendation?
Recommendation, that's correct. Right, but we have to, for these reasons,
Explain what, based on what we have now, that
that's correct. For these reasons, we'll put those together and we'll present those before the commission on Wednesday.
Right.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, if we're finished with that business, as I said, I'll wait for, the feedback and any statement that you have. I'll put that together. I'll send it back out to everyone for final review. And we'll just move forward from where we are right now. But if anyone from the public has any comment or wants to say anything, please, I think Michelle, do you have anyone that's there that wants to say anything?
Yes, we have one hand up, Linnell Jones.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Ms. Jones.
Hi. I want to thank all of you, and I want to mention that it was actually reading the Circa material and also reading the material from the Nature Conservancy, who's working with the redevelopment committee, and they're working with SLR, and it was their work with the Western COG, which I've since learned it means Council of Governments, but they did a lot of work, and it was there I learned about this Western COG POCD, and Norwalk's POCD needs to be in line with this one, and harbor commissions are very important and well established, as is our plan. I thank you guys tremendously for all your work. I know it's not easy, but I do believe there are some issues with the Utile report, specifically because it's in direct contrast with Circa, or somehow it missed on the harbor side the fact that water's going to come up. And I think a lot of people can't get their heads around this. Chris, I think you can. I know we disagree on this report. I think it leaves out other important issues, but it's better to debate, and it's better to bring the issues out. And the real unspoken one remains Manresa. We know DOT wants to use it for whatever. I don't know what they're telling you, but as a general public, I appreciate all that you guys do, because we get less information than you do. Thank you. Sorry if I went over 3 minutes.
Linnell, thank you very much for your comments. Michelle, anyone else?
Diane Lorigella.
Oh, yes, okay. Hi, Diane, how are you? You're muted, Diane. Diane, you're muted. Michelle, can you unmute her mic, or does she have control over that?
I prompted her to unmute, but she may be having some technical difficulties.
Okay. Well, Diane, would you want to put what you have in writing and send it to us?
Oh,
I did forward over an email later this evening to this committee. I'm assuming her comments will be in relation to that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
right, in the chat, Diane has said she's having technical problems.
Oh, right here it is. Yeah, there's something coming up here. Hold on.
All right.
Answer live, type answer. Having tech props. I see. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, Michelle, is there anyone else in addition to Diane that would like to say something?
No other hands up at the moment.
How many people from the public did we have in attendance?
There was 4. For a while, Margot didn't have last name, dropped off maybe like a half hour ago.
Oh.
And then Steve Bardish is on as well, but he did not raise his hand.
Okay. Well, Diane, do you want us to wait maybe perhaps 1 more minute, or what's the commission's, would you just want to hold on for a few minutes until Diane gets her microphone in order?
Well, we can remind the public that we have a meeting in 2 days and there'll be time at that.
Yes, she can comment. You can comment then too, Diane. If that's because we're having a commission meeting on Wednesday.
I believe I received a email from Diane. I think we all did shortly
Yeah.
before the meeting. I think if we got that.
Yeah, it was a pretty lengthy and detailed analysis.
All right, well, just as a recap, guys, I thank you very much for going over this. There's a lot of information here, and there's a lot that's been covered, and there's a lot that we've done in the past. And I think we need to take this with a very fine-tooth comb, because as I said, there's some circuitous logic here with regard to one document referring to another and back and forth, et cetera, as Matt had put it. But we need to hopefully clarify those statements and clarify our position with regard to the POCD and also the waterfront industrial zone. So as I said, for the bullet points, just get the points up but like I said, we need to come up with a few statements prior to Wednesday's meeting to bring before the commission. And in the meantime, I've been in contact with Brian Thompson, who has to sign off on the document that they reviewed, the POCD that they reviewed, and we're certainly waiting for that information. He was called it was past Friday. No, it was Thursday, and he got back to me Friday afternoon, and he said he'd try his best to get that document to us on Monday, before Monday, but obviously that didn't come to fruition. So anyway, all right. Any other further comments anyone would like to make?
Just thank you. For this,
Yeah,
this
no,
good
Jeff, thank you
discussion.
very much for that history. I'll tell you,
Yeah.
it's important. It's important to know what went before, because if you don't know what went before, you continue to make those same mistakes. And I think that's where we were headed to.
Yeah. Remember Roland Clement?
Yes.
He was a good member of the Harbor Commission, but during this process of the planning and zoning back in the 80s, he was also chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So he's another example of Norwalk residents that were really committed to developing that municipal coastal program and preserving Norwalk's maritime character and protecting coastal resources. And things change, but I think if you're going to change them, you have to explain why it's still consistent with the Coastal Management Act and why it's necessary for the change.
I agree. All right, there's another comment in the chat box. Diane, PS, include my email in record. Would you want to read it? All right. Okay. All right, no further business, no further comments. I think perhaps, Michelle, we can call it close to our meeting.
Sure.
All right. All right, everyone. All right, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
guys. Good night.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys.